Welcome to you all. We will resume with the next panel discussion, and this time the title is Delegate Promotion Between Public. The commitment to delegate is promotion between the public and private sector. Clara Blanchard from El País, a journalist, will introduce the different speakers, and as we have seen, we have throughout the day we have an outstanding panel. Thank you very much to you all. Thank you for being here, those who are online and on site. Let me introduce the speakers. First of all, Javier, who has already spoken. Javier Buron is the manager of the Municipal Institute for Housing, and he is actually the person in charge of this webinar, and he mentioned that he was like the grandfather around here. So Ana Jané, she is a CEO at Savills Aguirre Neumann in Barcelona. She's a great advocate of public-private partnership. She's an enthusiast of this formula where she says that we need to stop thinking about a clash, but rather to collaborate to solve this major problem of lack of housing. Borja García Egocheaga is the CEO of Neynor Home. Is the biggest promoter, the biggest developer of Spain, Cimasa, and they are partners with Cimasa to manage this development in the delegated promotion project. And finally, we have Laia Fournet. She's a sociologist expert in town planning, and she's a partner at La Hidra Cooperative, and I think that she can bring a more critical view of the role the private sector plays in the housing industry. Let's begin with Anna. Speakers have 8 minutes each, and then we will have a discussion, and we will conclude with questions. So you have the floor, Anna. Thank you very much, Anna. It is a great pleasure to be here with all of you today. My intention in this panel discussion is to bring ideas, so that because not only the ideas that Javier and Borja have tabled, but also the practical case, which will surely be successful, is yet one example of many mothers. We need to be to take this first step to solve the major problem of housing our society has. This is a scourge for us, and we need to be able to find solutions for this terrible problem from our standpoints each. Maybe we should speak Spanish for the benefit of Borja. I don't know. No, I understand Catalan perfectly well. Maybe it's easier. Not at all, don't worry. I will continue. Going back to what I just said, this solution, access to housing, is a must for all of those who are sitting around this table and those who are connected to the real estate sector and to the market. What would be the solution? I'm sure we would find different formulae and differences depending on our background, but I'm sure that we can find consensus on a number of issues. The first consensus is we're all aware of the fact we need more affordable housing. In Barcelona, in Madrid, and in many other Spanish cities, such as Bilbao, the pressure of demand is huge, and there isn't enough affordable housing. And affordable means housing that is offered below market price. So we need more supply, because we're still very far from the European average, which is around 15% of affordable housing in the market. The second great point of consensus is that this kind of housing should be for rental homes. And this is very relevant in Spain, because the scarce investment we've had here, the effort that has been made in producing social housing, has been for purchase. But what really works is rent, because it provides more mobility for the use of that housing stock, so that we can provide an answer to those who are really more in need. So we need to increase the supply, and to increase the supply of rental homes. So let's move forward in this quest for consensus. How can we generate this new supply in rent? One option would be 100% public supply, and the other option would be a private-public offer. They are not a contradiction. They can all move forward in unison. In Barcelona, we need about 100,000 affordable homes. So the production is huge. It is a very relevant figure. So what happens if we have a 100% public solution? If we look at the budget, the state, the Catalan government budget or the city council budgets, despite the fact that nowadays a bigger effort to devote more money to the production of homes, this is not enough. It's far from enough. We need the private industry. We need the private sector. And what should be the role of the private sector? Money to complement this production of homes, and not only money. I think what's most relevant and indispensable from a technological point of view is to offer their know-how in the construction and also in managing this housing stock, rental housing stock, because there aren't that many managers for large rental housing stock. There aren't that many in Spain. Why? Well, because our housing stock, as we all know, has been basically for purchase, not so much for rent. So we will have to create this new profile. But the knowledge that these persons have is extremely valuable at the moment. The private sector should play this role of offering money, expertise, and know-how to both produce and then manage, which is even more complex. To manage, the second part is even more difficult because, as we all know here, Cebasas, which is your partner, is almost a unique company. And let me also add, what should be the profile of a private investor, because not all private investors would be suitable or would find it suitable to have a collaboration with the public sector. What is that profile? It should be a risk-averse investor who works long-term, and in exchange for low risk and high security, that investor would be willing to invest their money and would have be willing to accept limited profitability, because the private sector needs to have a limited profitability in this sector, in this industry. There are such groups. These are institutional profiles. Is what we call the core profiles. But we need to, lure more people into this market. We need to get much more money in this industry to produce this affordable housing stock our society needs. And what does the public sector is required to do? I think that Javier has explained this very, very clearly, but let me make a few comments. Offering of land, of course, and then some money, of course, and then creating the framework where this can happen. What is that framework? It would entail legal security, long-term vision, no changes in the rules of the game, because we're talking about a collaboration that will last for many, many years. And I understand that sometimes, even if there's a will to do it in such a way, it's not always easy to achieve, because the real estate production cycle is very long. It's much longer than the electoral cycle, than the politicians' cycle, and very often we have changes in the law or changes of government, and that leads to some of the agreements that were made at some point to be challenged. And this is what we should avoid, in my view. So I think we should all make an effort if we really want to be effective in producing these homes. We need to be able to reach consensus. It should even be thought of as a state agreement, because we cannot afford having changes in housing policies every time the government changes. And of course, we live in a democracy. Governments do change. So we need to find a broader consensus. We need to be really focused on what our society needs. We need to understand the role each of us has. We need to have a mutual trust. That's essential. We need to distribute evenly risks and profits. We need to understand everyone's intentions and motivations, and we really need to sit down and work hard on this. And based on what I just said, Javier, without having discussed it together, we both mentioned, he already mentioned it, this collaboration that these two gentlemen have mentioned between two partners has taken a huge amount of time. It was built bottom up, and we need to have a framework so that this can be replicated in a simpler way, without so much checking the market, without so much negotiation, because they were in front of a blank page. So we need to establish some ground rules so that we can continue cooperating in a way that our society needs. And that's basically what I wanted to say. Thank you. Borja, good morning. Egunon, says the speaker in Basque. I would like to thank the organizers for having invited me, says the speaker in Catalan, to this session. And now I will continue in Spanish with my Bilbao accent. It's really interesting to see what we, private industry, the private businesses have to do with this. This is a presentation somehow of a different public-private partnership, because, well, this is something that has been going on for many years, and there are many obsolete formulae that still work, some of them actually from Franco's times. But let me talk about what a business is doing here. Before I go into the topic and along the lines that I have been hearing here, I would like to underscore what are the two axes where we are finding more challenges in housing policy and in town planning. One of them is access to housing. We have a major problem there. And the other one is urban regeneration and sustainability of housing. In both fields, we may have public-private partnerships. Many of these partnerships are yet to be defined, yet to be invented, but we need to keep on working on this. About access to housing, as Anna said, this is not a matter of large cities such as Barcelona that has a very high growth rate. The metropolitan area of Barcelona is the fourth more densely populated metropolitan area in Europe, and it still has a growth potential of 10% for the coming years. So this, of course, gives rise to the need to add more housing. But in smaller cities such as mine, Bilbao, which is not growing, there are still many problems to access housing. And what does that mean? We need to really look at which sectors we are talking about. We are talking about the more underprivileged backgrounds, people with social exclusion profiles, people who live under the poverty line, or newcomers and immigrants, and they need a quick response. But we are seeing also a problem to housing problems for the middle classes, especially the children of the middle classes and young people who cannot access homes, and this is becoming more widespread. So companies, we need profits. If we don't have profits, we disappear, and this is a necessary condition, but it's not enough for businesses. Businesses are part of society. We are part of the ecosystem. Everything we do affects the ecosystem, and therefore there are a number of variables and factors that have become an essential prerequisite to survive long-term as a business is what we call environment, sustainability, and governance. Environment, social, and governance criteria. And companies such as Neynor have a lot to say. We're trying to turn around the traditional model of developers we've had in Spain towards other kinds of businesses, which are much more integrated in society, open-minded and collaborative. This is bringing us some added value. And it's a way to move forward in the future for us. As we found out, these collaborative projects, and we analyzed it, we realized that we wanted to participate in it, not with a for-profit organization. That is what we are going to leave for our private developments and our land purchases. But we really do want to develop the social part of the company, the S in ESG, and to take advantage of the possibilities of Neynor. Neynor is a company with 300 workers. 90% of them are professionals. We are able to design homes based on the needs of each area. That's why we have good market analysts, we have architects, we are able to bid for tenders, we have good departments with lawyers and economists, we know how to do the construction work, we have engineers, we have technical architects. And in this case, when we were offered this opportunity, we didn't have much expertise in rent. It is true that we have the aspiration to offer both rental homes and private homes. We believe that private rental is also a need and part of the solution in the cities, and is one of the areas of focus for our company, but we know that we are newcomers in this field. We bought a company on specializing on rent in Madrid, Renta Garantizada is called, but we thought we needed some more. So we found some partners, and we really found it easy to collaborate with them because we see the business in a very similar way. That's Cebasa. They are highly professionalized market operators, and it was really easy for them to have this 50% private this private part of the partnership and to bring our know-how to the project. And what happens with that project? Well, it's going to bring us an important social dimension, and we are really happy. We like it because it's an innovative project. We like the model. We like the way it is devised. We have a joint participation, a joint stake, and what we are offering is our work. Those teams that I mentioned earlier, our teams will be made available to this joint venture so that we can build the homes, and we believe that that's what we can offer to the project. That's our contribution, because we can build and build well. I understand that public-private partnerships, PPPs, may generate mistrust. In some cases, we had to sit down and find agreements. Even if you work at 50% rates, that's being able to take on big risks. But it's also being very brave in many ways. But I am sure that this project is going to work smoothly because the authorities know they need this, and we can offer a very solid team, which is the main asset of a company such as ours. We have the ability to work, we have a good team, we have honesty and integrity. That's the kind of a team that we can offer to our joint ventures so that they can work together. And that's what I can offer. I'm sure this is going to be a success case, and this is not the end. It's just the beginning of a long-term collaboration, and we need to find further ways, further formulae to solve the town planning challenges and the challenges that housing poses in many cities. So my horizon is a 10-year view, and that's basically what I want to do. Let's explore these collaborative models even further. Thank you.
I would like to ask you, Borja, if I can speak in Catalan. Of course. I will understand. Okay. I'll be maybe the designating note. I would like to thank you for the invitation. We are not developers. We are not the public authority. We are not housing managers. So as Clara was saying in the beginning, our role here will be a bit different, but the idea and the willingness is to try to find a dialogue, even if we are a bit of a conflicting note. Let's review the background, the historical background, because of course we are not starting from zero. We know that partnerships first were born in the 80s, mid-80s, but the idea was rooted in the 1990s in the sense that collaboration is important, and that the government needs to reduce and minimize their role and ease the way for for the market, paved the way for better market conditions, and that was good in terms of efficacy and efficiency. It was quite a promise in terms of better management. It was a promise that had to do with being less bureaucratic, being more diverse and more collaborative, so that all the stakeholders involved could actually become engaged and really participate and be involved. We'll see, and we've seen that the governments have reduced their involvement, and it's actually difficult to find a space in the market where the role of the government is not the protagonist one. As Borja was saying, the public-private collaboration, that's not new in Spain. Together with the UK, in Spain, we have quite a lot of PPPs. 11% of the volume, the global economy, is accounted for by PPPs. And it's different because we don't have an office to regulate those PPPs. Actually, the European Commission has criticized Spain because it's the country that, supervises the least these externalizations, these outsourcings to private partners. So we have a protected housing model that was rooted during the times of Franco's regime, and it was built on private capital, and it's actually led to the lack of protection in this housing stock. So that has contributed in terms of the real estate bubble and price increases. So the PPPs that are part of the housing sector have favored a monopoly on the part of large construction companies and large developers. It's implied mercantilization and the loss of public land bankings, and that's not happened in other European Union cities maybe. So today we actually don't know much about the housing stock, and there is no control whatsoever on such housing stock. But today we are here and in order to redefine this collaboration. Again, we are not starting from scratch. As Mazzucato would say, and we know, Javier, that you follow her quite a lot, how to make this, how to turn this into a virtuous relationship. That's the idea. We don't want the government to decapitalize itself. We would like to control somehow and be able to monitor the housing stock, and we would like to have a more accessible and more affordable housing stock. Along the lines of what we heard before, we need to reach out for the private commitment, but not only insofar as the public authorities part of the pie. It really must be a public and private collaboration. And that's our willingness. We would like to improve access to housing, and of course this would not be possible. It will not be possible unless we define a different management methodology with other supervision parameters that are more democratic and more transparent indeed. Because when we talk about public-private partnerships, we must speak about how we democratize this collaboration. So how to incorporate participation and transparency and supervision mechanisms into the equation, because the change in model is not just about economics. It is about economics, but it also entails a different governance, and we heard this before in the morning, also yesterday, how to incorporate the third stakeholder, which is the citizens, the citizenship. So here, the private sector also can learn much from the public sector, also from the community, the social sector, because we have the land use cooperatives experiences. There's private capital contributed by the citizens themselves, and then subsequent management of those buildings without the need for any other stakeholder. It's just the users who actually take part in the management of the buildings they they inhabit. We heard from London before, there are organisms and bodies where the voices of citizens are heard, or Berlin, Vienna, they all have these mechanisms available, and that is not the case so far in Spain. So we need to redefine public-private collaborations, and we should demand greater transparency coming from the private associations in terms of assessment and follow-up, including social indicators. It's not just about the will or the willingness to do something, but this actually must be proven, and it must be explained to the society, to the citizens, how to distribute the resources so that we don't favor just the large developers or the large investors, but actually in a way that they provide a return for the citizens, and how do we help the citizens participate more and become more involved in an affordable housing stock. And just last but not least, I just would like to mention one of these realities that is occurring in Barcelona and elsewhere. We heard it from Anna before. I'm referring to the concept that protected housing is only possible thanks to an alliance with large developers or large investors. That is not true, not always. We think that a housing policy needs to be publicly led, so strong public run. The authorities can be the number one stakeholders, and from the ministry we know that public managers are actually working more, let's put it this way, compared to private managers. So it's not that there's no knowledge or no expertise, that's not true, but the government, the nation, that the state has decapitalized itself, and of course that has something to do with the context. Now we will have the next generation funds coming from Europe. They will not solve it all, but at least we have the chance to improve also the public part of the story after so many years of continuous decapitalization. We heard this before as well. It's not just about building new houses, but it's also to do with interventions on the built stock, so through the society, urban areas, city centers, so policies that have to do with housing purchases. Here PPPs also play a role. We conducted a report for EMAP, and we would we would estimate the possibilities that we would have when it comes to building new houses. And in the district of Poblenou, we saw that the potential covered over 2,000 new dwellings, actually. So there is room for maneuver. There is a way ahead. And in this new redefinition of the public and private relations, we need as well to think about the fact that what's public is actually at its best now. It's a good moment, so they can compete also in the private part of the market. And the challenge is here. We need to innovate in terms of governance, so control, supervision, transparency, and democracy must be guaranteed. Thank you. Very interesting, very interesting. Laia was mentioning that the pie does not only belong to the large partners, and I think that there are pieces of the pie for other stakeholders as well. So, as you were saying, this is just one part of the story, indeed. So I still have some questions about governance, because we had talked about this before. You have 4 board members, and then 4 and 4 exactly, and then the external controller. But then in case of a tie, this person would undo the tie. Yes, of course, if something very, very terrible would occur, well, we have another safeguard as a clause. Public actions can never belong to private companies, whereas private actions could indeed be owned by the 2 partners, and then the company would no longer be mixed but public. So mixed, but with 2 public partners. Hopefully we won't get there. That's not what we have in mind. It's not that we are planning on having problems, but of course we want to work for the society. And I was saying this before. We have distress capital, and activists call it vulture funds capital. People purchasing packages at low prices and then gain profit. That's part of capital that we as public authorities should not become involved with. And then there's capital that is interested in producing housing units. So that's related to development, and here we might have tactical alliances, because we must produce a lot, but also relate to private partners, and they can help us. But the strategic alliances are with the core capital that you're referring to. The core capital, just to be clear, it's, well, calm capital. Of course, we want to make money, but in a calm manner. Boring business, if you allow me to put it this way. It's like it's the elephant in the room in Spain, because it's not mentioned. We heard from Socha before, 27 million houses in the EU. That's what the network represents, and most of the cases these are PPPs, and they have their investors, their investment funds. So it's not a myth. It's not that they don't exist. They do exist, but it's underdeveloped, this part of the market in our case. So we need a product that's well structured. And as Anna was saying before, the fact that we have had to invent the rules bottom up along the way, that's super problematic, because we need, not just in Barcelona, but all the public authorities need, that's good for the investors as well. We need a clear product. Clear, yes, I would say clear. As Laia was saying, risks need to be defined, and everybody needs to know what their stake is. It's best to start with risks, at least, even if it's bottom up, rather than doing nothing. That's my view. But it's very necessary that these schemes, the capital, the governance, what the product will be, we need a framework, because there's not that much to define, but the framework needs to be clear. Okay, so I would like to ask Anna, you are used to talking to investors. Do you think that the formula of delegated promotion could be attractive? Yes, no doubt. I think it's attractive. And going back to your previous question, I would refer to something that Javier mentioned. When we say investment, the realm of investments, I mean, it's the whole color palette. And Javier said it very clearly. There are several groups, and the investors that we would like to have for these PPPs is very specific and very well defined. And we need to be clear about this. This money, this type of money, I mean, behind this type of money, we find small savings. They are risk averse, and small insurance companies, again, risk averse. They want low profitability, but they don't want to play with this money because it's their retirement. So that's the kind of money that we attract, and we need for that to have well constructed formulae, but the rules of the game need to be very clear, and transparency, of course, is paramount. As Laia was saying, transparency helps create safe environments. Transparency calls for more money. It's as simple as that. So we need to, well, find an approach between these two worlds so that we can achieve our goals. We have difficulty in accessing housing, and that's a reality, and that's a failed society. So we need to focus on finding the solution. The idea from Anna was good in the sense, is it easy to replicate? Are you interested in other cities? I know that they have a plan in Madrid. It's called Plan Vive, but they present tenders for packages. This 50-50 split, do you think, can be replicated in other parts of Spain? I think so. There are two types of models. Concessions for starters, how to generate mutual trust, strategic decision-making, risk-taking, accountability, transparency, how to involve your tenants if you've just given them some land and set the rules and the authorities are no longer there to be seen. I'm just saying the two models are different. So mixed companies, public, private, mixed companies, this model I think has an advantage. It's a sound solution for the present and the future. So there could be smaller companies. I mean, you don't have to go that big. And what I'm going to say now, we had in mind 4 or 5 years ago, but it's more complicated in terms of the economy, etc. But some PPPs can maybe purchase and then renovate and then manage rents of existing housing stock. I mean, as Borja was saying, renovations can be combined, and Laia also was mentioning some parts of Poblenou district, so combination between renovation and affordable rental housing. I think that between the two methods, concessions and institutional, or the model that involves creating a company, it's different. Simply, I'm thinking of our colleagues in the rest of Spain, and I can tell you what everybody is going to say about my intervention in the city hall. Some interlocutors will say I don't have that much money, or I don't have the connections with the city hall. So these difficulties exist. I'm not going to deny them. I'm not naive, but as long as there are projects, and as long as it's not a utopia, we have a private investor, and then you have the public company IMAP. We are a public company, so as long as the projects are done, as long as there are dwellers in those buildings, as long as we hear from them and they tell us how happy they are living there, it makes it easy for the model to be replicated. An additional nuance: there are many housing subsystems in Spain, because you know that the powers are regional. They belong to the autonomous communities. So some traits are in the DNA of this project, and these sound like science fiction still in other regions. Land is public, and we are going to own the land for many years. How much have we struggled over this? A year and a half. That has been the length of our struggle. We were not intransigent. We just advocated for our ownership of public land. All the protected social housing in the future will be qualified for forever. And I hope this is durable, but the goal is, it's not around the corner. In the previous session, we heard about affordability, permanent or affordability at perpetuity. Okay, this is not habitual in other regions. The fact that the whole project is 100% for rent In other regions, some people would say, well, let's have 50% rent, 50% purchase, so that you have two different business models. So these would be the comments that we would hear. If we make good strategic decisions, we may generate 50% of the dividends and we may reinvest them in the same type of project. That idea means that we can also have 50% losses. And some people will be withdrawn from the position. It could happen to me. So we are taking risks, and there is no perfect roadmap. I would like to encourage our public sector colleagues to talk to the private sector. It's not difficult to find core investments. It's relatively complicated, but you need these investors to be reliable, local, that will be next to the project on a daily basis. That's not easy, but it's not impossible. Can it be done everywhere? No. Can it be done in many different countries in Spain? Yes. And Bilbao is the case. We are both from Bilbao, the two gentlemen here from the Basque country. So Bilbao is the case. It can be done in Bilbao. So we need to encourage this more and more. And the projects will not be identical, but that's not an issue. They will be similar. There'll be some differences, but this must be done. It can be done, and it must be done. And what about you, Borja? Any interest arising in the industry? Or what are the reluctances that you've heard in relation to a project like yours? Well, the first comment is that it's an unknown path, and this generates, of course, uncertainties. In the end, as we are saying, and as Anna said, the type of capital that we have in mind for these projects, and that's what we are going to do. We will create a company that does this with time. This capital coming in is risk averse, indeed. So for the first time, sometimes people say, oh, you're going to do this and with the Catalans, with Colau in power. Yes, I mean, this is not a matter of political colors. The playing field is so huge, and we have different potential stakeholders, and there are projects that are much smaller. Energy renovation, for instance, energy efficiency renovation projects, these are very small for us. We are not there yet, but maybe in the future, maybe we will in the future, and we will, penetrate other industries, because again, the field is huge and the challenge ahead is huge as well. On the other hand, for the international investors, because that's what we capture, international capital. When Neynor was born, it was created by means of a vulture fund. An American fund would purchase a package of land from a bank at a very low price. They took the risk. 2014, they dared to invest millions. They organized a company. The company went listed, and they were gone. And then off you go. So that now we have an institutional investor long term, so they like the PPPs because the PPP concept exists elsewhere, and they wonder why that is not the case more often in the housing industry, since there are so many problems. I have a question for Laia, because you mentioned the involvement, the engagement of the citizens. So when we look abroad and try to copy best practices, Vienna, Denmark, you name it, the tenants' unions play a role there as well, right? Even developers associations. Here is like the goodies and the baddies, and that's the way they depict themselves. So maybe we should go more official, let's say, more institutional, so it's not just about formal reports versus protests. They should bridge a gap, right? And they should play a role, because where things are done properly, this is the case, and they make joint decisions on pricing, etc. Correct?
Yes, I think that this is a collective challenge, which is involving us all the different parties. As you said, there are some examples where we are hearing well, we are giving, well, a voice to those who live there, rather than providing a home. A house, we would like to provide a home. As somebody said, I think the London speaker, there's a huge difference between the two things, and we need to look into that. That should be our focus. There have been also proposals on governance and tripartite governance, but they are more on a national level. We'll have to see what it means, the building, the specific development, or this this government that would involve other public authorities, including private, social, and institutional partners. I fully agree with what Laia said. I had the possibility of writing a piece of news with Eduardo Fernández de Molina, who knows endlessly more than myself about housing. And we were thinking about, well, this new law on housing should include the voice of tenants and also of homeowners, of landlords, because landlords need, all of them need to have their own interests contemplated. For instance, the duration of rental terms, but also the assurance that they will have to be paid, for rents to be paid, and so on. But because if we don't have consultations, then the parties will not be able to say what they need, and they need to make their voices heard and to put things black on white. And I think we need to continue asking for this. I think it's an indispensable step. Just 27 seconds. In this context, I would say that there are two requests from my mayoress and my councillor and one of the Cebasa managers, so the private and the public sides of the equation, and they express it differently, but they look for the same things. In the case of the public world, they say, how can tenants participate in some of the projects that have to do about how their life in those homes? And the market would be, like a product committee. A product committee needs to include users, of course, and in the public world, that is translated into citizens' participation, exchanges, and so on. And from the side of the public capital, they have always advocated for the company being publicly listed, so that there's, for instance, 40/40 and private capital. Who would be offered to buy the shares? First of all, the tenants, so they can buy their shares, and then to whoever is in the public market to have this quiet profitability, and so that we can continue to get capital for our funds. So it is true that we have not reached that point, but it's not that we are not thinking about it. Yes, we are thinking about it. Is it not going to be easy? No, it won't, but it will happen in the end, eventually. So let's move on to questions. We have a question here. In this public-private partnership, how are the future tenants selected? For instance, is this only for vulnerable people? Well, we do that following the same kind of criteria as any other non-social but affordable homes. This is the same thing. It took us a little bit of a discussion between private and public institutions, but it is just like any other IMAP development or IMSOL development. But we'll have to go to the famous registry? Yes, it will. A question addressed to Javier. You said that Habitatge Metrópoli Barcelona is just a percentage of everything the city council is currently doing. What is and what should be from 2010-20? Well, I don't have a crystal ball. This is a sixth of what we are producing, so there's another sixth, which is what we build with cooperatives and foundations. So 2/3 is produced by our own means, and 1/3 we are using the public-private partnership collaboration processes. What is this going to be like in the future? We don't know. I might be wrong. If public-private partnerships do work and civil society understands that we are respecting certain limits and the private capital feels comfortable and we create a new kind of public manager who works in PPPs, then that percentage should increase. But that is for new homes production. Everything we buy and everything we recapture to devote them to public rental programs is direct management. And the only thing that we have is a third sector institution. That's where we are not participating with this. To do good PPPs and to understand a private businessman or woman, you need to be a good manager, a good public businessman. We need to aspire to more, and we should be some of the drivers. And can this project receive some next generation funds? Well, let's hope it is. We are eligible, just like any other institutions, and the ministry understands this relationship with the metropolitan area of Barcelona as a joint relationship that includes this project. Another question, sorry. When we tried to create models where the public sector kept the ownership of the land, then we didn't get any funding. Well, Euskadi proves that's not the case, because banking institutions in Euskadi have funded this kind of homes. There is a very large institution in Euskadi which is funding with land rights and land cessions. There have been a few in Barcelona, and this is just a myth. It's not true. You can get the funding even if the land is owned by the state or by the authorities. It has been funded. It is true that during the crisis it was more difficult, but now what is happening is that as there's public authorities putting money there, the private banking institutions are saying, okay, I want to play this game too. So it's not a problem to get the funding. That is not the problem. I'm really sorry to say that time is up. I would like to thank you all, and I wish we can meet in about 5-10 years time to see how everything worked. I think it'll be a really interesting panel. Thank you very much to you all. It is obvious that the relationship between private and public institutions in the housing field can play an interesting role. The starting point was that the housing problem was very, very serious, and that we needed a new rent housing stock that is affordable. Borja told us about the social values, environmental values that the private sector can offer, and Laia has also called for a change of government and a change of model and change of governance. So we are laying the foundations for the future, and collaborations are abundant, and there is a lot to explore there. Thank you.